Before we get into the video, I'd like to remind you that the release date for the first ever Challenger Series decks, Cowboy Bebop and Trigun Stampede, is the 19th of January. The UniVersus roster is growing, with Cowboy Bebop returning with Spike Spiegel and Faye Valentine, and Trigun Stampede bringing Vash the Stampede and Nicholas D. Wolfwood. A quick spoiler warning that the cards contain stills from the show and there may be some show content discussion. Check with your local store to pre-order or pick up on release dates. UVS Games are also running a launch event from January 19th to February 18th where you can earn yourself loyalty points, formerly known as redemption points, by playing as one of the 4 Cowboy Bebop and Trigun Stampede characters, and additional bonus points if you play all 4 during the span of the launch event. Check the link in the description for more details. If you don't already have a UGN account, when signing up, if you click the drop down for How Did You Hear About Us and click Content Creator, you can enter our name, the Daubers, and your account should be credited with 50 loyalty points. Thank you so much UVS Games for sending over this product to unbox.
While we had planned to have me only cover one deck in this video, we couldn't really agree on a direction or even a symbol for the character, so we decided to put together 5 decks, and I'm going to go through each of them with a short elevator pitch on my thoughts and choices with the deck. We might even cover cards that I might consider including post rotation, since some of the decks are playing cards from My Hero Set 1. We also made the choice not to include the SRs in these decks, since they can be a little bit harder to get your hands on. Lastly, these decks are more akin to something you would take to your locals, and not something you want to be running at regionals upwards, especially not without some extensive testing and changing card quantities. Just a disclaimer before someone ends up trying to take one of these to the HLC and get smashed. Especially the last deck. I don't recommend anyone plays it, but I'm definitely going to give it a try. Right, kicking us off, we have Desperately Struggling to Stay Alive. I knew since we had access to 12 attacks on water that could unflip Ruin Foundations, I wanted some really annoying pieces of water defense that flipped themselves as cost that we'd be able to recover throughout the game. So I landed on Struggling with Studies, Wall Climb, and the namesake card of the deck, Desperately Struggling. Hopefully by being able to reuse Desperately Struggling, our 29 health will last a lot longer since our opponent won't be able to rely on the buffs to do attacks. Rounding out the attack package we have Neck Chop, which is quickly becoming a favourite card from the Ochako starter deck, and Meter Froskies, which is basically just a swimming bird you ordered on Wish. Looking over the foundations in the deck, we've got 4 copies of Syndicate Target, nice and simple, plus either low block, we don't mind flipping it to Spike. We've got 2 copies of Surprising Skill, it's a bit of stun hate for us, flips itself as a cost as well, which will be a bonus in the long run thanks to the bottom enhance on Spike. 3 copies of Surviving the Final. The -1 speed in our opponent's turn is okay, but when it comes to our turn the card does nothing. It's just another foundation we can throw out there to fuel the first enhance. Fast Friendship and Resourceful are around the speed hate in the deck, especially being able to recover Fast Friendship if we need to. 7 spam foundations that can help us go long in a turn or ready themselves up for defense, and 3 copies of Skeptical and 4 copies of Weightless. Got 3 copies of Struggling with Studies, 2 copies of Self Doubt for the low block and also it can help us be a little bit more aggressive, 2 copies of End the Dream for when we know our opponent just can't block anymore and we're definitely connecting with that attack, 3 copies of Light It Up for passive damage, 2 Cheerleader for defense, because sometimes resetting stats just isn't enough, 3 Wall Climb, 1 copy of Broken Psyche. We could probably get away with running more of this, but we don't want to be in a situation where we can unflip it but we won't have the momentum to fuel the next time we use it. 2 Finally Awake. It can just give extra stats to most of the attacks we're playing, only Fallen Angel's Revenge doesn't meet the requirement of being high or low. 1 copy of Vast Hybrid. It can give us momentum if we need to turn on some of our defensive pieces. Alternatively, the +1 to your check or +1 to damage to your attacks for the turn are also pretty good. 1 copy of Blood Evaluation. It gives us another foundation that can ready itself, and we get to draw a card off it the first time it does each turn. And finishing off the foundations, we've got 4 copies of Desperately Struggling. We just want to guarantee that we see one pretty early in the game, and from that point we can hopefully just reuse the same copy. In the side we have 3 copies of Nullify, 1 more copy of Cheerleader, 1 more Wall Climb, 1 more Broken Psyche, 2 Lost in Thought for Problem Foundations, and 2 copies of Face Shield because sometimes just resetting the stats isn't good enough. The only MHA set 1 card in the deck is Wall Climb, and while it is quite a useful card, especially being able to unflip it throughout the course of the game, we could always drop them and bring in the 3 copies of Nullify from the side. This will give you a deck that you can play until rotation happens, and then hopefully UU brings out some good water cards with it that can help fill those spaces again. Up next is Point Blank isn't ranged, but these are, the name making fun of the fact that Point Blank Standoff doesn't have the range keyword despite it being about using a gun. Emma was looking for an excuse to play some of the set 1 ranged attacks before they rotate, so this seemed like a good opportunity to integrate Tongue Whip, Meteor Shower and Amphibious Ambush into the Spike deck. Focusing on the ranged keyword, we also included 4 copies of Nedry Wave and 4 copies of Spiral Blast. While I'm not 100% sold on the Hunter's Pursuit inclusion, I am keen to try it out given that it's a well statted attack that can make one next attack easier to play. Amphibious Ambush seems like a really good shout for the deck given that we have a couple of ways to spend the momentum that it will make, whether that's from Meteor Shower to be able to fetch another copy of itself from the discard pile, Nedry Wave to be able to pseudo stun free, or generate an additional attack with Spiral Blast. Even Hunter's Pursuit has EX2, so I'm sure we'll be able to put that momentum to a good use. Unlike the previous deck, this one probably cares a little bit more about Spike's second enhance to be able to push through with these attacks. So to assist with generating those face downs, we're running full play sets of both Wild Wild Pussycats and Window Shopping. Using these as effectively cards that say flip, draw a card. Even in a situation where we're able to use 2 of these before we play our first attack, it means with 1 activation of Spike's top enhance we're able to turn on his bottom one. We see both Syndicate Target and Surprising Skill making a return in this deck at 3 copies of each, with Fast Friendship and I'll Protect You both supplying -3 speed on an enhanced flip ability. High Value Target and Self Sacrifice give us some good foundations with low blocks, and 3 copies of Skeptical will help us go longer in an attack turn. Light It Up also returns a 3-off for that passive damage again. And we have 1 copy of each Incredible Display and Levitate. Levitate will allow us to filter when we're blocking and alternatively mill to find a block. And Incredible Display can allow us to reuse foundations we've blocked with, or alternatively cancel some responses that may be problematic. 3 copies of New Training Method will help us build early game, and then we can flip it just to pick up a foundation that we've checked, generating another face down and pseudo drawing a card. We've got 1 Wall Climb in the main with 2 more on the side because we're hoping to be a bit more aggressive, but if we do need them we can bring them in. 3 copies of First Villain Encounter. All attacks have the range keyword so they'll generate stats from this, and the drawback from committing kinda negated since we get -1 difficulty to the next attack. This deck's also running Blood Evaluation, this time as a 2 of. We can discard excess momentum to be able to ready this, allowing us to go longer in a turn. Last card in the main deck, we have 2 copies of Rescue Complete. We can use this to effectively give our face down foundations a little bit of an extra life since they'll be able to commit for -2 speeds. Turn them all into some basic speed hit. Not to mention we can destroy this if we ever need to ready 2 face downs to allow us to go deeper. In the side we've got 3 copies of Instant Shining Flash for decks that are momentum dependent, extra copies of Incredible Display and Wall Climb, 2 copies of Vast Strength to bring in against attacks with problematic enhances, and 2 copies of Lost in Thought for problematic foundations. Up next we have Earth Flips or something. I was struggling to name this one and asked Emma, and this is the response I got, so we went with it. This is based on a Cementos deck that I was messing about with. We've basically swapped the character here, brought in Spike's Ultra Art and Rare Attack so we can try them out in this build. Previously we were main decking Red Guards and running Zero Gravity Rush. This deck intends to go into Deadlock. It's not uncommon for my Cementos version to get to 15 face downs before the game ends, and we're able to survive that long thanks to the 2 playsets of Regeneration and the ways that we have to unflip them and reuse them in the deck. 34 of our 46 foundations have some way to flip, plus we get an additional 4 from seizing the advantage, and Mimicry can copy any of our foundations with the exception of the new number 1. Neck Chop's got a chance to become unblockably fast, and Split Second Standoff will also benefit greatly because it will be able to make itself 10 speed before we add spike stats. Fallen Angel's Revenge should also help be able to refresh some of these super regens or any other cards that we need. Hardened Jab's mostly here so we can pick up a face down foundation we want to play face up again, but it's not impossible that we'll end up with an attack face down thanks to the 3 copies of It Can't Be Fixed or the 4 male bondings. Really keen to see how this version does. Cementos has a good advantage because he's able to generate a larger hand size, but Spike is able to give speed and damage to his attacks opposed to just damage. Having a quick look at the foundations, we have 3 copies of Warm and Bubbly just for additional damage reduction, 3 It Can't Be Fixed for stun hate which will also generate face downs, 4 male bonding because eventually we will get hit and we're able to just generate more face downs from it, High Value Target as it helps us defend, Return of the King yet again helps us defend, gives us a low block, Red Riot's the coolest, allows us to flip itself for damage, Weightless gives us a way to ready foundations, we've got 1 Vast Strength in the main board just for problematic matchups, we can always flip it if we don't need it, 3 copies of Prehensile Tail, quite good interaction with war attacks that unflip foundations, as we're able to have used it in a previous attack, then unflip it to use it again, effectively drawing as additional attacks. 3 new training method to help us build / pseudo draw. 4 super regen as I mentioned. 1 You're So Obvious, yet again just like Vast Strength, it deals with problematic things, if we don't need it we can flip it. 2 Glamorous for additional uses out of some more foundations. 2 Concern for a Friend, it just allows us to draw cards if we need to. 1 new number 1 for resetting high speed attacks. And the 4 Ultra Regen, just for additional health gain and longevity. In the sideboard, the only cards we've not mentioned, we have 4 copies of Redguard. Quite good block, we can always throw it out as an attack if we need to. And 2 copies of Cooperation Offer if we need additional speed hate or someone's messing with the zone of their attacks. In terms of what's rotating soon, we do lose a sizable amount of the deck with Hardened Jab, It Can't Be Fixed, Super Regen, You're So Obvious, and Glamorous. So it'll be hard finding replacements for these, but we can always shore up numbers of other cards in the deck. We can even bring in the Red Guards to replace the Hardened Jabs. The card that's going to hurt the most to lose is Super Regeneration, but maybe we'll get lucky and Toughest Punk and Junior High will be among the reprints coming in the UU set. So unlike the other Spike decks so far, we've kind of limited the amount of foundations that naturally flip themselves here. We're more looking to use Spikes first in hands to guarantee that we're drawing a card every time we play one of our throws. Should probably mention the deck's based on throws to start us off right, but I guess the name gives that away. Instead, we've looked at some ways we can include passive damage in the deck, like multitasking. Since throws are already normally pretty slow, we don't really care about readying an opponent's foundation. Full on attack mode, since it's always guaranteed to do that additional little bit more damage. We also have Light It Up reappearing to deal with some more passive damage, but I don't know if we'll always have more face downs than our opponent. Most notably, damage wise, coming off our foundations, we have 4 copies of Ending the Dream here, because eventually your opponent will just run out of blocks, and that's when we strike with all of these. Or alternatively, they may be a little bit more apprehensive about blocking our attacks if we've got 2, even 3 of these sitting in play. The deck also has a copy of Area in the main board with an additional 1 in the side. We should be guaranteed that we're going to generate momentum since our attack lineup is all throws. For the attacks themselves, we've got George Armor, which can generate its own additional damage. Overhead Reversal allows us to build in one of our 10 zero diff foundations that we can then flip to Spikes Enhance. Creeping Vine gives us a way that we can recur face shields from our discard pile. Reverse Throw could also generate an additional card draw. And Zero Gravity Lift allows us to play with less progressive in future turns if we hit with it. Like most of the other decks, Syndicate targets back here is a 4 of. This time we've chosen to go with keeping Eri safe over Denki playing the guitar, mostly because we don't really care about the foundation being flipped. We've got 2 copies of Release, 3 copies of Multitasking, 2 copies of Hatsumi's Design for some speed hit, 3 copies of Energy Suction, which will get us some health back if we play at the start of an attack string, thanks to all attacks guaranteed to deal damage. And once it's built, it's a good target for Spikes and Hands since it doesn't do anything else for us. We see 3 high value and 2 self-sack returning again, the 4 ending the dream, 2 light it up, Incredible Display, Monstrous Ferocity and Levitate all back at 1 of. Monstrous Ferocity gives us guaranteed access to a mid block until we use it. 2 new training, the 3 face shield here so that Grasping Vines might be able to pick one up. 3 copies of Leaving the Bebop. This basically just says enhance, draw, throw. We should definitely have the momentum for it. 1 copy of Blood Evaluation, same again, we should be able to pay to ready this, allow us to go longer. And 2 copies of Rescue Complete. In the side we've got 2 Ruthless Mockery just for some additional defense. A few more 1-offs just to add additional copies to our deck if we need them. 3 Vast Strength, same again to deal with problematic attacks. And 2 copies of Lost in Thought to deal with problematic foundations. It's pretty straightforward. Sadly, come rotation, we lose access to 2 of the throws in the deck, Self-Sack, Release and Rescue Complete as well. I'm sure we'll be able to find replacements for the foundations easily, but the attacks will be a little bit harder. Might look into working in Fallen Heel Kicks, or even Spikes UR, to guarantee a way that we can refresh some of our foundations that we might care about, like Leaving the Bebop. On to our last and definitely the least likely to function deck out of our group. Right, Hear Me Out is a jank deck based on the fact that we've been cutting Spaceland from each of these decks so far. If you haven't read it yet, Spaceland is an action with 2 enhances. 1 is Enhance Remove, ready 3 face down foundations, and the other one is a first enhance that requires at least 10 face down foundations between both players and makes an attack unblockable, with the caveat that it is your first enhance and then it also ends the enhance phase, so we'll have no way to pump the damage of our unblockable attack. The game plan is quite simple here, but having it actually work in practicality will be a different task altogether. We're going to stay alive until we can get to 10 face down foundations in play between us and our opponent. And then hopefully in back-to-back turns, we're able to kill our opponent by playing split second standoff and using the Spaceland first enhance to guarantee an unblockable 8 damage attack. In the main deck we're only running 6 attacks, 2 copies of Tongue Capture that will help us generate momentum, and if the stars align it may give our next attack +2 speed, +2 damage. And 4 copies of Split Second Standoff, which has the highest base damage that we can actually play. To help increase the damage further, we're running 4 copies of Basic Training to hopefully turn that 8 damage into 12 damage. And then in addition, Vast Hybrid could give us an additional damage on top of that. So if the stars align, we can make unblockable 15 damage attacks, just once per turn. So by this point you really realise we're living in magical Christmas land. So the rest of the deck is either designed to keep us alive or to help facilitate the fact that we're looking for very specific pieces. Now even though we have no way to find the Welcome to Spacelands from our deck, we do have a way to dig to try and find the split second standoffs, with the 4 copies of Leaving the Bebop that we're main decking. Obviously it will feel bad if you roll into Tongue Capture here, but thanks to the inclusion of Tongue Capture and the Vast Hybrids, we should be able to generate the momentum to trigger the first copy of Leaving the Bebop, and then every subsequent copy of Leaving the Bebop should be able to get triggered by the attack we made unblockable previously. In theory. We're also running another Amajiki card that I can't remember the name of for the life of me, to be able to protect one momentum so that our opponents can't disrupt this kind of flow that we have for the game. Realistically, this weird game plan will take us a couple of turns to not only set up but pull off, but I'm going to try my hardest to make it happen at least once. For the rest of the deck that we haven't really touched on, we've got one copy of Vine, commits to draw a card, could help us trigger that +2/+2 from tongue capture. Also, if our opponent overextends, the discard might actually be relevant. 4 copies of Syndicate, that shouldn't be a surprise at this point. We touched on the 4 basic, we've got 4 copies of Warm and Bubbly for the additional defense, 3 copies of Denki playing the guitars for stun hate, 4 copies of Fast Friendship for speed hate, 4 copies of Weightless to keep foundations ready on defense, 3 copies of Return of the King for additional speed hit. We won't be triggering the momentum ability on it. 4 copies of Daunting Message, it's a good low block, we're able to selectively commit foundations that might mess with us. 3 Struggling with Studies for extra defense. 3 copies of Lost in Thought, not only to deal with problem foundations but also to get us back block zones we might need. I can foresee us having to survive for a while here. 4 Faith Shield for the very same reason. 2 copies of Sun Eater with the big 3 to protect momentum. 2 Stalking of Prey just as additional speed hit. 2 Soul Manly for disruption on our opponent's attacks turns. And then we get to 10 free diff foundations that are in the deck, with 4 copies of Leaving the Bebop, 3 Vast Hybrid, 2 Concern for a Friend for more commit draw. We won't be able to use the second ability on it. And reluctantly, 3 copies of Bubble Distraction, because despite water being the symbol of water, there's very little soak in it. If you manage to pull this off game 1 or game 2, well, I mean, if you manage to pull it off at all, you should take a victory lap, but I wouldn't expect the same trick to work twice. So our sideboard is really just based on bringing in good attacks that might help us win the game without this kind of jank combo. So we just have 4 copies of Neck Chop and 4 copies of Meter Froskies, with 2 Desperate Struggles in case we need the extra defense. Right, I know this deck is a pipe dream and a half, but I'll put it together. If I can, I'll record the games, and we'll see if we can make it happen. Hopefully my locals don't watch this so they don't know what's coming, but we'll see. Anyway, that was 5 deck ideas for Spike from the new Challenger Series decks. Let us know if you plan to try them out yourself. I know I'll definitely be getting a shot with each of them, and then we'll see how we get on. Maybe we'll do a video after the launch event so we can talk about if any of the decks that we've put up for this actually worked, or what we liked, what we didn't like. I don't imagine I'll convince Emma to give this one a shot, but I'll definitely give it a try. Keep your eyes peeled for a similar video coming out tomorrow for Vash, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.